Hi everybody, this is Bastiaan and this is the annotation of a game I played against AICE, spelled AICE. One of the later versions, so it's 2500 plus ELO. And I set up the boards for the Evans gambit. So the Evans gambit starts out with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4, bishop to c5, and then b4, the Evans gambit. And at this point I let the engine take over and black immediately plays d5, and d5 is the Evans gambit declined. For black to accept the Evans gambit, black takes the pawn, but if you play the Evans gambit every once in a while you will see the Evans gambit declined, and this is exactly what AICE plays. So now there are three possible continuations, because both pieces are under attack. Either bishop takes pawn, probably followed by knight takes pawn, and bishop to b3, definitely playable but looks a bit tame. Also possible is pawn takes bishop. Then after pawn takes bishop, both sides have doubled pawns on the c-file, and white could continue with bishop to b2 to attack the pawn on e5. That's definitely also playable. But I play the third possibility, pawn takes pawn on d5. So now I'm attacking both minor pieces. Black continues with knight to b4, bringing the knight into safety and removing the threats on the bishop on c5. And this looks like a nice continuation for white, because it looks like I'm gaining a free attack on the pawn on e5. But it's wrong for white to take the pawn at this moment, because if knight takes pawn, black has an immediate refutation. He can play either queen to g5, attacking the knight and the pawn on g2, or even better, he can play bishop to d4, forking both pieces. So knight takes pawn is a mistake. The correct continuation is to castle first, and now I am threatening knight takes pawn. So let's say if black plays a random move, say h6, I can take the pawn. Now the queen move makes no sense, because g2 is already protected by the king. But bishop to d4, forking both pieces, doesn't work at this point, because white can simply continue with rook to e1, protecting the knight. And if bishop takes rook, white can play knight to c6, check, winning the queen. So after castling, white is threatening knight takes pawn. So black plays e4, bringing the pawn into safety and also attacking the knight on f3. So I play d4. And d4 is a deflecting move because it forces this pawn off of the attack on the knight. If black wants to attack the knight now, let's say pawn takes knight, white can continue with pawn takes bishop, regaining the minor piece, attacking the pawn, but also this king is still stuck in the center. If black wants to have compensation for his pawn, let's say pawn takes pawn, which is probably the best move, attacking the rook, white can play rook e1 check. Then if king to f8, bishop to a3, threatens the knight, also a discovered check. So if a5 to save the knight, the in-between move c3 will kick the knight, knight to a6, c6 check, and black is forced to lose material. Or if a5 isn't played, immediately knight to a6. Then we get the same idea, c6, discovered check. Then if knight to e7, black will lose material, and b4 can lose the queen. Otherwise, if not, king to f8 is played, but knight to e7 to block the check. White can simply play d6 and gain a minor piece. And if pawn takes, pawn recaptures. So that's why pawn takes knight is losing for black. Meanwhile, I am attacking the bishop, which is protected by the knight. And the only possible play for black is to accept the deflection and take the pawn en passant. There's no other way, because if bishop takes pawn, I can simply take the bishop, and if bishop retreats, I can play knight to e5, and we can see both the knight and the bishop out of play, and black's pawn is defenseless, whereas white has a strong knight outpost on e5. So pawn takes pawn en passant, and probably the best move now is to take on the pawn, but I developed knight to c3 instead, sacrificing the pawn on c2 for quick development. So pawn takes pawn, and now I'm taking advantage of the undeveloped king. Rook to e1 check, queen e2 check would have worked as well. Knight to e7 to block, I'm getting ready to castle. Now queen e2, because of pawn takes queen, and black castles. So I continue development with bishop to g5, adding even more pressure on the knight on e7. Of course, black cannot play f6, because then simply d6 attacks the bishop with a discovered check, and after king h8, pawn takes knight, forks both rook and queen. Queen takes pawn, queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, rook takes bishop, pawn takes bishop, and knight takes pawn. And white is winning. So f6 doesn't work. Black instead tries bishop to g4, attacking the knight, also pinning the knight because of the discovered attack on the queen. So I take on the knight. Black recaptures my knight. Pawn takes bishop. Bishop takes bishop. Queen takes bishop. Now queen can take queen, but black plays queen to d6 instead. And once again I can play queen take queen, which is a good move. But I want to develop in order to attack the king. One way to do it is a rook lift. But I don't like rook to e4, because the rook has to remain on the e-file to protect the queen. If rook to e4, not only is there a threat of f5, attacking the rook, but also preventing rook to g4. There's also a threat of queen to h6. And I have to keep in mind that there is a pawn on c2, ready to promote. And this will force white into the defense. So instead I choose to develop my rook to e3. It will take one more move to move the pawn to f4 in order to get an open third rank. But the rook on e3 blocks the diagonal for the queen. Probably best would have been rook a to c1 to attack the pawn, and then kick the knight with pawn to a3, perhaps after exchanging queens, and get this free pawn. This wasn't played. Rook e3 was played instead, a solid move. Black plays queen to b6, rook a to e1, getting all my pieces on the open e-file. I need to keep at least one piece to guard c1. Black plays rook a to c8, covering the c7 pawn, giving more mobility to the queen on b6. f4, opening up the third rank for the rook. Most likely I will develop the rook to g3 to attack g7. a5, because the queen is attacking the knight. Again, this frees up black's queen on b6. Queen to e5, getting my first piece attacking the g7 pawn. Of course, black cannot kick my queen off of the e-file, because if rook to e8, then simply queen takes rook, exchanging the queen, rook takes queen, rook takes rook mate. So my queen is safe for the moment on the e-file. Black plays queen to c5, threatening the bishop in some cases. And I play knight to e4, attacking the queen and abandoning protection of the bishop. Now, if black takes the bishop on c4, let's say queen takes bishop, I can continue my attack with rook to g3, threatening mate. And if g6, to prevent mate, I can bring the knight in, knight check, king h8, knight h5 check, f6, queen e7 threatening mate on g7, and if pawn takes knight, the g file is open, queen g7 mate. If instead rook to g8 to cover, we get queen takes pawn check, rook blocks forced, and then queen to g7 mate. So queen to c4 is losing for black and cannot be played. Black plays queen to b6 instead, getting the queen on the 6th rank. So I want to prevent the queen from stepping into the defense, and one way of doing this is to push the d-pawn. d6 is played, and it doesn't really matter if the pawn remains here or is replaced by one of black's pawns, as long as this queen is out of play. So black plays pawn takes pawn. Now if black plays something else, a random move, let's say a4, the attacking idea for white is rook to g3 as said before, g6, knight f6 check, king h8, knight h5 check, and so forth. So we're seeing the same continuation. So instead black exchanges the pawns, pawn takes pawn, attacking the queen. So either we have to move the queen or play a move gaining tempo like a check, and I play knight to f6 check. Now both pieces are being attacked. However, pawn takes knight cannot be played, because then rook g3 check, g file is open, king to h8, then queen takes pawn mate. So black has to find something else. Black since checked, so he plays king to h8. I'm still being attacked, and I play queen to f5, threatening mate. Again, this knight cannot be taken, because if pawn takes knight, we get queen takes pawn check, king g8, rook g3 mate. So black has to find another way and tries g6 to block the mate. Now we play rook to h3, because we don't need the queen to give mate. The rook will do just the same job, because if rook takes pawn, the only difference is that the king can go to g8. That's not possible with the knight. So we're renewing the mate threats with our rook. And now in desperation, black starts sacrificing material. So if pawn takes queen, we get a mate. But black plays a desperation move, queen takes pawn check, king recaptures, knight to d3 check, bishop recaptures, and finally h5 to prevent the mate, which rook takes pawn. But white can simply crash through, rook takes pawn check, personal fork, but it doesn't matter. If pawn takes rook to prevent a check, we get queen to g7, but king to g7 was played. Now the queen is doing a nice job protecting the knight, and we get rook to h7 mate. So that was my game against Ace using the Evans Gambit. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the game and have a great evening.